In this part right here, this is where I start drawing the Vietnam Wall that's traveling through Kissimmee, Florida. And I sit down and I start drawing this wall. And I'm watching all these people walk across this wall looking at all these names. So in my head, what I start seeing is all these people walking across this massive drawing that I drew, looking for where they met me and they signed the drawing. And in the beginning, I thought I heard Hemingway whisper my name, so I turned myself into a cartoon character and I hitchhiked to Ernest Hemingway's house. And I sat and drew it. From Ernest Hemingway's house, I dreamed of a conversation with Stephen King. So I'm going to go to Stephen King's house, and it's by thumb, so I'm going to be hitchhiking. And these are some of the people I meet and some of the things that happen on the journey itself. Like this right here, this was Tom and Jerry. It was Hogfish Tom and Jerry. And these dudes, like right here, this was this alligator lighthouse down in the Keys. These guys were lobster fishermen, and one day they went lobster fishing, and instead of pulling up lobsters, they pulled up a bale of weed, and that changed their whole reality. So that's a whole story. And then here, I'm hitchhiking north. So at one time I used this as my hitchhiking sign. And sometimes I had to leave bags behind here and there. I would lose everything and just keep the yard. I would actually have a backpack, clothes, all this stuff. Everything would get too heavy and too much to take care of, and I would just take everything and just walk off with just the art and start over again, on a constant basis. This is a good poem right here. This was my grandmother's grave in North Carolina as we're heading north. Here I'm like, I want to draw myself a ride with a trucker, so I drew this picture, and then a truck driver pulled over and picked me up. You start to lose, am I drawing what's gonna happen, or am I drawing what did happen at a certain point? Here we talk about the true king of the road. Okay, in certain places, like you could tell here, slept in the rain right here, where I was making markers of where I was going. Was lost right here. Got stranded in New York City for 3 days. Get into Pennsylvania. Here it shows this is how I survive. We'll draw for food. See, in some of these poems, like they all mean certain things. Like this one here is, once I was alive, now I died. What did I take? Must have been a mistake. The truth of the matter is, I'm on a trip. It's all clear now. I can't come down. Here I met some witches in Massachusetts, in Ware, Massachusetts, and we went to this grave site, and they did this whole witchy thing, and it was right by Gilmore's grave. So I just thought that whole concept was really cool, And then here's where I met this dude, JB, and he was a junk man, and we had talked about doing a gig, me painting his truck and trade for a car. Here, like they got these old cars out there, and you start seeing the ghost of the 20s. Here I meet this kid, and he had gotten a carnival accident and was paralyzed from the neck down. And I sat down and I started drawing, and his name was Joey, and I said, I'm gonna make you immortal, dude. And I got him to smile, and his grandparents, and heard the whole story about what happened. And so here I find Grizzly Adams' grave on the way, and somebody said, why a woman? I said, oh, it's always about a woman. This is in Massachusetts. This is me leaving. It was in Shrewsbury Street, this place I was out. They told me the story while I was there about these firemen that died. I think it was 6 firemen that died in the fire, and that was before 9/11. And I was on my way to Stephen King, so it was 9 lives. Here would show, like I met this girl and talked about yesterday, you know, which we meet a lot of people on the road. Here I'm sitting under a bridge at night holding a flashlight, drawing me sitting under a bridge at night holding a flashlight on my way to Stephen King's. And that's where I met this dude named Norm. And when I met him, I was like, Norm, I've been waiting to see you since I've been to Massachusetts because of the show Cheers. So we go to Stephen King's, and I sat in front of Stephen King's house. This was one day sitting in front of Stephen King's house. And then next we went to Canada, and then they asked me to leave Canada. And I was standing there laughing, and I was telling the border guard, I said, dude, I can't believe you let draft dodgers in here, and you won't even let me in here. But anyways, we went back, and then I spent 2 days in front of Stephen King's house. And
you never met him?
No, I didn't meet him. I found out he owned a local radio station. You know, this is hyponics. You start dissecting the draw, and every little thing in here actually has a reason and a code for it. But I went to the local radio station, and I met the dude there, and they told me he wasn't in town, but he would like it a lot. But here's where I dreamed of a conversation with Stephen King ends and begins the concept of I thought I saw the ghost of Elvis, which I had this really cool conversation with Stephen King in my dream that I wanted to tell him about. One day I'll tell him. So now I'm headed toward Graceland.
Kind of a pivotal moment.
Yeah, this is when first time I was in a newspaper, and it was in Worcester, Massachusetts. And I went back and I painted that car and that truck for that dude to be able to drive out of there. So this is what happened while I was there. I met this girl that was Catholic, and I went to Catholic school and studied Catechism for a while. Then the snow hit, you know. And I try to express the emotion of, so this is Christmas where I stood, you know. And then so this picture right here is when I actually got the car. And then see, so from the year 1991 to the year 2000, in the mirror is the concept of that is yesterday, you know. So, and then we're coming into tomorrow, you know. So. And each one of these, like I said, would tell you a different story, and it would get really involved if I actually sat down and started telling all the stories, you know. And this tells a story about these little 6-inch hippie dudes from Nevermore that crossed over into our realm, which starts the whole concept of The Lost Child of Nevermore. Which was a book I wrote while I was traveling across country, you know. And it explains how these dudes enter our world into a shooting star, and it splits them up into 4 different time zones, you know. And one of them lands in Beethoven's time zone. And when Beethoven was deaf, and he did Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, which was his most famous symphony, he actually could hear. He could hear these little 6-inch hippie dudes, and they were telling him the story of Nevermore. And that was the Sixth Symphony that he wrote, was actually about the story of Nevermore. You know, so each one of them hit a different time zone. Like one of them landed in Benjamin Franklin's backyard, and that's how they showed him electricity, and that's how he discovered electricity. Was the whole concept, and then it all tied together into the day. But here, this part right here was. I got a car, and this guy's telling me, he's trying to talk me into staying in Massachusetts, and he's telling me I got responsibilities. You can't just take a drive in your car across country. And I said, dude, if I wanted to, I could pick up a rock and paint a peace sign on it and sell it for $5, and I'd get enough gas to get the hell out of wherever I'm at. So I picked up a rock and I painted a peace sign on it. And I told the story the next day to this guy, and I showed him the rock, and he said, man, I'll buy that, and he gave me $5 for it. So then for about a week, I'm running around picking up rocks, and I started painting them. And I actually painted enough peace stones to get out of there, you know. And here I was doing something, helping him in his junkyard, doing some stuff, and sliced my hand open, and I was telling him that God doesn't want me to do anything but art. See, he's telling me, you know. And we had gotten this big discussion and argument about it that ended up over here to where I actually then left. And went back to, and now I'm in North Carolina. And this is another time I was in the newspaper, But this part right here is because Bruce Lee is a dragon, and every journey needs a dragon, and eventually I will go to Bruce Lee's tombstone and draw that. And I realized this because Wilmington, North Carolina is where Brandon Lee died. So I went to Wilmington, North Carolina, and I drew this picture right here. And I went and I met the secretary to vice president at MGM Studios, and then I got it put in the newspaper, about Brandon Lee because of his dad. Which I don't really understand a lot of what I'm doing or the concept of why I'm doing it until I start to get closer to the end of finding Nevermore and everything starts to piece together. Here's like I meet Moby. This is where I meet Moby in the morning. He was a DJ in Houston throughout the 80s, and at this time he's in Atlanta. And I listened to him all through the 80s. So I walked up to him one day and I drew this, and I met him and talked to him, and 9/11 happened right after that. So because 9/11 happened, and then we're talking about the horses of war, and everything that's getting ready to happen to these guys over there, So I end up back in North Carolina, back in Fayetteville, right outside of Fort Bragg. And Moby had paid me so much money to do these little sketches of him while he was with this radio station. And then I met this guy, Rhubarb Jones, which is another DJ, and did this about him. And then I went to Graceland, and then I did this drawing right here was about Graceland. And then this is when I met the, no, this had nothing to do with that.
Hold on, let me zoom in on Graceland.
But this is Graceland, where I sat in front of Elvis's grave and sat and drew. And then I got the complete concept of every journey needs a dragon after this drawing right here at Graceland, which Graceland was really cool. They wanted me to hang out longer, but I'm going to tell you, Graceland was really cool. The people were really cool. As soon as you get out of Graceland, which is 1 block away, it was the combat zone, and I grew up in the combat zone, and I was like, I'm not going to survive in this atmosphere, so I just got my one drawing and I left, So then we entered the dragon and begin this part of the journey. Here, like, I found this turtle and I painted a peace sign on it, and I said Moby in the morning on it, and I gave it to Moby one day. I met him, I gave it to him, and he looked at it and he said, "What am I going to do with this, hippie?" And I said, "It's like a bottle in the ocean, man. It's sending a message through time. You let it go, and then one day somebody will find it and it'll spread the word." And I gave him actually 2 in a period of a couple months that were painted the same way. And then a couple years later, he called me up and he said, "Jefferson, I was out in my garden and one of those turtles came up to say hi to me." So I couldn't get over it. I had to call you and let you know, And then we hit Christmas, and actually the very first time I sat down to draw a music guy was my nephew. He was playing a guitar, and I sat down and I sketched him, and that was the first time I ever incorporated music into the art itself, because before at this time right here, music is really just like people. It's just the background. It's nothing more, and this shows the concept of that. I go to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and you don't see people. It was an off season, and people were just really the background. Everything else is the picture. So I don't understand the concept of what Pootie was talking about at the time, because I haven't had the conversation with him yet about people. So this is the concept of North Carolina. And everybody always asks the question, what would Jesus do? Well, actually, we know the answer to that. Jesus would suffer. So I like to ask the question, what would Batman do? Because Batman would take the environment around him and rise above it. here I'm doing this pet shop, and I sketch out the idea before I paint it. You know? And then here I go to Edgar Allan Poe's museum because, quote, the Raven Nevermore is the whole reason why I'm drawing the picture of finding Nevermore. You know? So I went to Edgar Allan Poe's museum in Richmond, Virginia, and drew that. And here I'm painting a mural for a restaurant, so I do my sketches for the ideas, you know, work it into the drawings. You know. Here I'm started painting this mural with this car lot, and this is how when my car dies, I end up with another car at one point in time. These people right here are really good people. Here, this is in Virginia. This is my brother's grave. He died in Virginia and he's buried up in the mountains there. So I went and drew this. This one right here, and he died. He was murdered. He was a prison guard in Virginia, and he was murdered when he was at work. So it was a real big deal, you know. Here, Robert E. Lee is buried in the basement of this church, and it's on Jefferson Street. So I had to make a drawing about that, you know. And here, my brother-in-law is a deer hunter, and he's up in the stand, and I sat and sketched a drawing of that, because in order for the drawing to be anything, it would actually have to draw everything, and of course you got to have your deer hunters, you know. And then so here it shows where my car died up in the mountains, and I was actually at this particular time I was painting a racing car for this guy that raced cars, and he ended up trading me out that paint job for another car, so that's how I ended up with that car. And then like this barn right here this is on my grandparents' property, and this old barn is full of all this really cool old stuff that when I was a kid I'd go in there and I'd look and I'd see all the magic of all the history that was inside of this old barn right here. So this barn has always haunted my mind as one of the coolest places you could be, and it's just this little old shack, you know.